So Battlefield 5's reveal trailer just came out, and I couldn't be more bored after listening to that piece of news. Yay, another Battlefield game. It takes place in World War II this time. Yay! Thank God they didn't make a Battlefield 2143, because that's just basically what Call of Duty has sort of turned into. Whatever, it's a video game and there's a controversy, and every single time that happens, I should be the one to shed the light, apparently, as some people suggested. And the people who helped me shed the light on this matter is, of course, my new patrons. Huge thanks to Peppy, Aston, Chris, and Mindful Wolf for the pledges. You guys are fantastic. So what's the controversy this time? Well, it all started with the reveal trailer of Battlefield 5, which is one of the most misguided and confusing trailers that I have ever seen in my entire life. It's as if the marketing team decided that the best way to make sure that you're hyped about this game is if they throw random garbage at you. Explosions, tanks, gunshots, a woman with a prosthetic arm in the front line. Wait, what? A guy who wields a katana. Wait, what? What the hell is going on here? Is the camera supposed to be the player character or just a standard one-shot camera guy? If it's the player character, then why didn't the player character at least attempt to shoot the enemies at the beginning of the trailer? So what? He's just staring at the events occurring around him and not fight until the last few moments in the trailer? Or maybe he doesn't have a gun at the time. You might find it odd that this trailer is in 60 FPS, the actual trailer I mean, not this video, which means that whatever you see right there is perhaps indeed the in-game footage. There are so many confusing things on this trailer that I could go on and on asking questions, and what an absolute mess this trailer is. I don't know if this trailer is supposed to be a scripted single-player gameplay footage or a multiplayer gameplay footage. One thing I know for sure is that there are a couple of sequences that are very much scripted, like taking down a plane by shooting a grenade midair, a very scripted camera movement shot where the player sees the plane and where the rockets dropped, and the absolute most confusing and simultaneously hilarious statement of them all, best played on Xbox One. Smug PC Master Race comment is smug. And we're not even started with the whole women in World War II controversy that people are talking. You know what? Let's just get to the easy parts first. The woman in the front cover, I actually really like it. She looks tough and pretty freaking badass. And like the front cover of Medal of Honor Underground, the front cover of this one doesn't necessarily have to represent the World War II as a whole. It can even represent certain scenarios of World War II where women are more prominent in their roles. As a whole, the woman in the front cover, I don't mind at all. On the gameplay side, well, that is something that people are complaining. Now, I have no problems with women on video games, especially women on the battlefield. To say that I don't want women on the battlefield is a blatant freaking lie. However, they don't have to be on everything. There are places where their involvement is a little bit out of place. Women being in the front lines in World War II is one of those places. I mean, yes, in specific instances, there are women who are in the front lines of World War II, but knowing that Battlefield 5 is going to be a multiplayer-focused game that gives players the ability to choose their gender, that would result in a game with either a 50-50 split between men and women, or a game with a disproportionately large number of women. Because we all know how these horrible basement-dwelling gamers love to roleplay as women, the sexist sack of losers. Yes, I know, I shouldn't throw stones. A World War II game with a disproportionately large number of women in the battlefield is going to be completely unimmersive to the supposedly authentic World War II experience. Because most of the fighters in World War II are men. Even if you find one or two examples where it isn't mostly men, you will be bombarded with 10 times more that mostly involve men. Now that doesn't mean that games with World War II aesthetics cannot have women in it. You can definitely do that, as evidenced with games like Valkyria Chronicles. But Valkyria Chronicles is a fantasy setting that borrows a lot of World War II aesthetic, whereas Battlefield is supposed to be an authentic experience. Now before you say that Battlefield has never been a realistic game, nobody is asking the game to be Arma or Operation Flashpoint. They're just simply asking the game to be a little bit more considerate on the authenticity of its setting by assessing the number of men and women who are involved in the battlefield of World War II. It's nice that Battlefield 5 gives the option for character creation, but again, that would result in a disproportionately large number of women compared to men in World War II. The single-player campaign of this game will work just fine because they focus on specific stories that just so happen to involve women, just like Medal of Honor Underground. And do you guys remember this forgotten World War II game, Velvet Assassin? Not a lot of people complain about that game, and I think that's for a very good reason. The multiplayer, however, it's going to be a really different World War II experience that is going to be inauthentic to the actual World War II experience. Now, with all of that being said, those are the complaints that people in general have with the game. I generally do not care about Battlefield 5. I'm just simply trying to articulate what people's real problems are about the game. Personally, I think the single player is going to be just fine as long as they focus on individual stories. The multiplayer, well, the only thing that I can say is that if you really want a game where you can brutally murder disabled women in World War II, good for you. You're a terrible monster, but good for you. So those are people's complaints and my personal take on the whole debacle. So of course people will listen to it, consider our perspectives in a respectful manner, and not call us a bunch of women-hating sexists.
Oh no! There are women in Battlefield 5!
No, they will not. While I'm reading this article with the sorts of arguments that I or others would pick, I am also going to roleplay as how an actually sexist person would think, illustrated with a palette swap version of my avatar. I do this just so that I can illustrate to you that calling other people sexist or racist for having criticisms of the game's authenticity will only diminish the impact of what a real sexist would sound like. So I will give reasonable counter-arguments first before I finally turn myself into Mr. Horrible McSexist, just so that you can know how truly horrifying actual sexists are.
It's tiring to have to face this year after year, so it's almost not even worth pointing out that women serve in armed forces across the world during the conflict, mostly as support personnel, yes, but there were also examples in the Soviet Union, especially when they serve on the front lines, both on the ground and in the air.
I think we should close the argument there. How many of these women in the Soviet Union that serve in the front lines? Is that going to be enough to cause a 50-50 representation in the entire World War II battlefields? I don't know for sure. Let me know in the comments. One thing that I do know is that a majority of people who are in the front lines are men. The only way for you to win this argument is if you somehow prove that there is a 50-50 or close representation between the men and the women infantry in most World War II battlefields. We're not talking specific events where the women just so happen to be mostly in the front lines. We're talking most events. Since the game is going to be built on a multiplayer, most events are going to be built on the battlefield. And with that, having 50-50 men and women split, or probably even disproportionately more women, are going to break your immersion. Fortunately, it doesn't break my immersion, because a game where I can brutally kill women, and especially women who are disabled, now that is a truly immersive experience. Thank you so much, Progressives, for catering it to not only my fantasies, but apparently yours as well. Glad to know that I'm not the only person who is going to be sent straight to hell.
Yet that's where we are today, because we're talking about the words historical accuracy among gamers on the internet. Those two words rarely mean what they look like they mean. At face value, they appear to suggest a game has, or is striving to attain, some semblance of accuracy in its portrayal of the events in the past.
Here's another example at being completely disingenuous, very typical for these writers. No, writer, people are not saying that the game should be 100% accurate, but it also shouldn't be 100% inaccurate either. There should be a reasonable middle ground where people can experience the time period in a more fun way, but still maintain the authenticity of it. That's why people are using the word authenticity instead of historical accuracy. Battlefield 1942 is able to capture the spirit of World War II. It's totally unrealistic in a lot of the departments, but you can feel like you are in the war zone in that game. Just because a couple of things are unrealistic in a game that has a setting that tries to be authentic doesn't mean that it should totally be unrealistic. This is the same problem that I have with the people who complain about games like Kingdom Come or Witcher 3. Both games take place in a time period and setting where non-white people are just not common. That's why the demands of non-white people in the game are ridiculous, because it doesn't capture the spirit and the authenticity of the setting. The inability to distinguish between historical accuracy and historical authenticity just shows to me how incredibly disingenuous these writers are.
To truly present something accurate to the time period would probably result in a game you wouldn't really enjoy playing.
Nobody is saying that the game should be 100% realistic. Carry on, please.
What angry dorks mean when they say historical accuracy is not a game that's accurate to the time being presented then, but accurate to the aspects of that time, or the popular historical retelling of it, that are sympathetic to their current political and cultural beliefs.
Angry dorks. Nice jab right there, douchebag. No, I am not demanding this game to be sympathetic with my political and cultural belief. In fact, I am not demanding anything at all. Women on Battlefield 5? Thank you, DICE, for fulfilling my fantasies of murdering women. Now that I can date them, strip them, and murder them in video games. How cool is that? And if I am demanding this game to be more sympathetic with my political and cultural belief, it would absolutely really help, writer, if you can tell me my political and cultural beliefs. You're so convinced that I'm doing it for that. You must at least know what agenda I'm trying to push. Or more accurately, not push, because the game is already perfectly satisfactory.
It doesn't bother them that a randomly created soldier with no training can jump behind the controls of a complex fighter aircraft or expertly handle the cross-section of enemy weapons. They don't care that the streets of European cities aren't recreated one-to-one, or that uniform details aren't strictly adhered to, or that Battlefield's war is fought to the time limits and kill counts. Those things are acceptable compromises. It's a video game, and those are video games things that Second World War just needs to accommodate with its representation in order to work, yet introduce something as relatively harmless. It has zero impact on gameplay, as women or black soldiers where historically there were none, and suddenly the sky is falling!
Yes, because it's not authentic to the experience. Not my arguments, it's other people's arguments. I'm totally cool with this brutal women murdering simulator, and it seems to me that you are cool with that too as well. And you know what also has zero impact in gameplay, Kotaku? The lack of non-white people in a video game.
It's almost as though opposition to a British woman holding gun or a black man serving in a combat role has little to do with historical accuracy and everything about someone fighting their current views on gender, race, and society challenge in a space they thought was safe.
In other words, people are doing it because they are sexist and racist. Classic disingenuous Kotaku. Writer, you may call me Mr. Horrible McSexist all you want, but calling others for having legitimate critiques on this game is simply inaccurate. A real sexist like me would celebrate on the idea that I can brutally murder women, especially disabled women, in video games. With that, DICE and EA, I have pre-purchased your game, and I cannot wait for it to be released so I can jerk off to my murder fantasies. Thank you!
Battlefield isn't, and never has been, about recreating the past. There are far more serious and studious Second World War games for that kind of business. Instead, it's always been about letting people in the present use war as a playground. And if DICE wants to broaden the scope of those represented in those games, then that's awesome for everyone involved.
Evidently not, as the trailer has a severe number of dislikes. Evidently not, as you're making this article. Evidently not, as there are tons of people who complain about this. Not me though, this is Game of the Year material. And it seems to me that the Battlefield 5 producer agrees, as he said that it's all about the fun and not about the authenticity of World War II. Good for you, Battlefield 5 producer, and good for me too, because now I can have my disabled women murder simulator. Thank you so much, DICE and EA, for catering into my weird, messed up fantasies. Truly a paragon of progress and diversity.